quarantine sessions. We're super excited to be tuning in today because we have a very special boss lady as a guest. Amira Azzouz is the founder of one of the largest platforms for fashion and for women in the Middle East. It's called Fustany, fustany.com. Amira, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited. I don't know much about product development, so I'm going to learn a lot today. I know that a lot of the people and the entrepreneurs in our community are also very curious. They have been asking questions through our social media channels, and they want to know everything about, how to build that product, what kind of research you need to do, what kind of testing. So please, those who are watching, send us your questions, tell us where you're tuning in from, and we'd love to answer, and Amira will actually answer. So before starting, tell me, how are things in Cairo with the quarantine? How are things at Fustany right now?
So I guess for us at Fustany, I can't speak for Cairo entirely. I can speak for Fustany and Ask a Stylist. The whole team is working from home, and I occasionally go to the office with almost no one or one other team member being there. But we're trying to stay as productive as possible. We conduct all of our meetings on Zoom. We have daily logs. So far, actually, the team has been equally productive, which is awesome. And we try to brainstorm as often as possible together. So that keeps the team spirit going well.
Amazing. In terms of business, have you seen an impact already of COVID on your business? Or
of course, I thought at the beginning, I'm like, la, it's not going to affect us that much. That's little did I know, obviously. Okay, so it had a lot of different elements. So I have, two businesses, Fustany.com and Ask a Stylist. For Fustany, the traffic itself spiked much higher. At the beginning, people's the things people were searching for, they changed from one week to the other, which is quite it's going much faster than it usually does at this point. So we have to keep up with everything that's happening, tackle topics, tackle their interest at this point. So we were kind of running around, but then we got a hold of things. And I suspect with Ramadan coming in, things are going to be equally crazy. But as I've mentioned, traffic-wise, it's going great. Obviously, advertisers are not as active as they used to be, and you can't really blame them. So we're trying to come up with a lot of cool product ideas and use that time wisely to work and build other things. For Ask a Stylist, we had to do some shifts. So luckily, both products we offer, or the 3 products we offer at Ask a Stylist, they're all online. So we have that advantage. But at the beginning, people were not super interested to update their style at this point because they have more pressing issues to focus on. So we came up with this mini product idea of a wardrobe update. It's an activity they can do from the comfort of their own homes, and it will help them feel good about themselves, and it'll also be entertaining for them without them having to spend much money. So that helped us pick things up much faster. So yeah, and we're continuing on doing that overall with both Fustany and Ask a Stylist. We're launching several things to try and overcome what's happening.
Right. I can't wait to ask you a little bit more about this wardrobe, this new product that you're creating. But before that, just to give our viewers a little bit of background on how inspiring basically you are, tell us a little bit about how you started Fustany, because I remember you were a student, you were very young. It was 2009, right?
Yeah, correct. Bravo. Bravo, Valentina. I have a very good memory. I was back then still in college. I studied communication engineering. And I remember sitting in the lab working on my graduation project, which was what was it? I forgot. It's been too many years now. It was a control system for elevators. And at the same time, I had some money from a previous freelance job I was doing, and I put it into creating Fustany. But that was a very long time ago.
Wow. So you launched a platform which is huge. It reaches millions of users. How do you launch such a big platform, from the get-go?
Obviously, what we did back then, because I had very little experience at the time, took us much longer in terms of like doing it correctly, because we had to trial and error, but over and over again. But I can talk. I think it's more fair to talk when it comes to Ask a Stylist, because now that we have much more experience, we've been in the market for a longer time. It makes sense to give people like more of what's it called? ملخص المفيد in Arabic.
I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to speak any Arabic.
I mean, I'm sure the audience will understand. I don't know that phrase, but
Okay, I'll explain it to you later because.
Tayyib. And so take us a little bit through the journey. You launched in 2009. You started getting a little bit of traction. And did you realize the business model was right away advertising, or did you change through?
Like, we actually changed the business model a lot, because back then when we launched, it was purely a directory for fashion designers, boutiques, and magazines.
Oh.
And the way we made money back then was through having them pay subscriptions. And they were like people from the fashion industry, but from all over the world, and who want to gain access to Middle Eastern consumers. So that was back then. But then, like 2 years afterwards, or a year and a half afterwards, it changed into being like a fashion lifestyle portal. And we had it only in English at the beginning. And then when we took it to the Arabic version, which actually should have been done much, much earlier, but I was always very hesitant in regards to that point. But when we did it, we managed to triple our traffic in a matter of a month almost. So that was like an important step for us. Yeah, and advertising overall, I understand advertising overall is a very risky business model. However, with content, the important part about content is that you build an emotional connection with users, and the importance in that point lays in the database you're collecting, and at the same time, the way you deliver information to the user and the trust you're getting from their end, which I think is something a lot of businesses overall need, and they don't have that. Whereas content creators and publishers and portals have that point.
Right. You're essentially building a community as well. It's not a one-way conversation, right? So
we're launching very soon something super exciting, which would help us. We've always wanted to build the community part. To be very honest, it wasn't necessarily back in the day like our strength. Our strength laid more in SEO, but now we're launching something very strong community-wise, and that should balance the whole scenario.
Amazing. Now I want to get right into the lesson that you're here to teach us today. I mean, product development has been, it's a buzzword, it's talked about in entrepreneurship environments a lot. Why do we need to actually have a process for product development? Why not just get an idea and launch it right off the bat?
Because it never works that way, unfortunately. Life would have been so much easier for all of us if that was the case.
I love your straightforward answer. Right. And how do you, where do you start? What's the first step?
Okay, so I try to summarize them overall in like 5 steps, and a lot of them kind of in a way or another collide with one another, or they have to go on repeat with one another. But the first one, in my opinion, is the launch phase. So if you have a product, and if you're you have an idea, you do your research, you understand your competitors, you understand the right consumer for this product, I don't think you should be wasting too much time on perfecting the product itself, but rather just launching a very, very simplified version of it to get a feel of how the market reacts to it. And usually spending too much time to perfect things and trying to understand the user inside out without having valid grounds to test it on turns out to be the furthest thing from the truth that you've thought in terms of how the user or the client would react to it. So instead of spending so much time imagining, it's better to just dig in and start with it. So that's the first point. And the second one, in my opinion, I'm talking now purely, some of it might apply to other products, but I'm talking now purely about online businesses overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the second one is refining. Okay, so this one would be the bulk of where the work lays, and at the same time it's the longest process of them all, because you need to throw in something and then see how people would react to it and measure and then adjust and then relaunch something smaller, and so on. It keeps on going back and forth, and I don't think anyone is ever that lucky to have it done in like a month or two. It's a much longer process. For us, for Ask a Stylist, it almost took like a year. So that's why I would recommend, instead of like investing in a website that's fully and very well developed, to try out with a third-party platform first, because third-party platforms enable you to kind of adjust small things as you go. You wouldn't have to go back to a tech team to adjust these things. You can do it yourself, and they're quite easy to maneuver around. And it also depends what you're trying to test. If it's a big sized feature, you should give it enough time to measure. And even if it's not time, it could be, let's say I want at least 1,000 people to test this feature out, and for me to monitor the results, be it through, for example, Google Analytics, putting certain conversion points or pages you want the user to reach at, getting certain amount of bookings or purchases. And it could also, with small sized feature, I would recommend not giving it more than a day or two. And within each and every time you change something, it should not be a drastic change, or else whatever is working, you could lose it at this point. And when doing drastic changes, you could have additional parameters you didn't like put into consideration before. I don't know if I'm clear about this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering as you were speaking, right? So when you want to measure, right, what kind of conversion rate is considered a good conversion rate?
Okay, it depends from one business to the other, to be honest. Usually in e-commerce, you could see like a proper conversion rate would be starting 1.65%, and it could go a bit further up. But that's with, in my opinion, at least a tangible product, something like a clothing piece, electronics, and so on. However, with services, for example, like Ask a Stylist, we're still at a conversion rate of 1 to 1.2%, which is lower than like a physical product. But I think in terms of services, it's getting there. So that would be the average, at least in my opinion.
Right. And in terms of measuring that, aside from or other than Google Analytics, do you have tools that you can recommend or softwares that you can recommend to measure that kind of conversion?
In terms of conversions, it's depends what you're trying to measure. What we do is we have two different types of conversions. The bigger ones, which are obviously the bookings, the amount of bookings, and the smaller sized ones could be how many people are filling out this form, how many people are going onto this page. So you don't really need tools for this part in specific, but you need to keep track of the numbers. You could do that also on Google Analytics by like creating a conversion goal and writing, if user fills out this and that, this would be counted as a conversion. So at the beginning, I don't think you need much tools other than Google Analytics to make things happen.
Right. So
for us, sometimes it's, I'm sorry to
go.
For us, sometimes it's HubSpot, I think, as well. It measures conversions well, especially when it comes to interacting and talking to the customers. So
right. No, I was just saying we were on point 2. So launch, refine.
I lost track. Okay, so yeah, the launch part, and also it's very important at this point to try and keep things as simple as possible. So a mistake we did with Ask a Stylist at the beginning when we launched it was, first off, it's a completely new concept for people to styling itself is considered something that only celebrities or high-profile people would go for, but we wanted to offer it to the public with a very reasonable price and so on. So assuming that people would get this concept on its own is not the easiest thing, in my opinion, now that I know better.
Yeah.
But back then, we assumed the complete opposite, and we thought, okay, khalas, at the beginning people were not necessarily getting that point, let's expand. So we expanded different types of services: nutrition, makeup, artists, styling, and under each one of them there were several categories and several prices, and it got so complicated at some point.
Yeah.
I was like, no, okay, that doesn't make any sense. We took all of these off and we only added the simplest version of the product after receiving obviously a lot of feedback from the clients as well. And that's when it picked up. So in my opinion, I think starting off simple and starting off with a very reasonable price is the way to go, because you're currently still measuring how you can reach that ultimate conversion percentage you want to go for and get the best user experience at the same time. You wouldn't want to get too many users and get really bad feedback. That wouldn't be in your benefit in any way.
Yeah.
What else?
So you said figuring out a price that is kind of reasonable.
Yep.
What are the milestones that you mark? Where do you look for that, the perfect sweet spot?
Okay, so luckily in our case, we have Fustany, and we could reach out to the readers of Fustany and ask them different types of questions to figure out how much they'd be willing to pay for such a service. So that was something in our advantage, but usually surveys, comparing yourself against competitors, how much people in the area and in the region you're targeting this product to hopefully spread as much as possible are willing or can't afford to pay for such a service and so on. So it's a different combo.
Right. So we're on point number 3, on step number 3.
Yes, so step number 3 is reaching the proper conversion. So once you reach this, the proper conversion, you start focusing on smaller size details, such as at the beginning it was more of the crucial bits and pieces. Now it's more of call of actions. Where do I put this? Where do I put that? Sometimes at this point, very small details can make a very big difference. And think of it as like you're putting the cherry on top of things. And it's also a very crucial step to start hearing more and more feedback from your clients overall, and to keep an open channel between yourself and them. And what else?
Right.
That's basically it. So you need to, once you've reached that step, you're ready to start advertising and spending proper money to reach out more people. You would have perfected the process itself. You would have perfected the user experience. So it's reaching the right formula for things, knowing how to talk to your client in the right tone, in the right way. The steps are crystal clear, and so on.
Right. So there's a lot of interaction as well, as you said, right, with the customer experience, with all the other elements of the launch, right?
Exactly.
Right. And this brings us to the last step.
No, there are 5 steps. The last 2, 4, and 5, they're actually they go on rotation. So one of them is mainly to advertise, to start testing out the product on a larger scale and seeing how much you've adapting your message according to which markets you're targeting. Let's say for Ask a Stylist, we're targeting Egypt and KSA and UAE and USA at the same time, okay? So I can't really send out the same message to all of them. I have to be very careful on what would tick with this country versus that country and so on. Also offers a limited edition period offer them something sexy so they'd be more willing to take the chance, try out your product, limited to a certain time. When you're starting to advertise, we all tend to make the mistake of trying to tell people, my product does this and this and that. Instead, you should be focusing on what benefit the product itself would have. What would I, as a client, benefit from that product? So at the beginning, we were saying things like, I can't really remember the messages we were using earlier, but when we discussed with a couple of clients, okay, what is it in for you when you use Ask a Stylist? How would you guys phrase it in your own words? So they said something along the lines of, I'm much happier with my look, much more confident, and I managed to save time and money with it. And that became kind of the message we use quite often to advertise and to reach out new customers and so on.
Right.
What
That's
else?
critical. So using the feedback from customers to refine your message. I love that concept.
Yeah, it's super important. It's really important, in my opinion. And at this point as well, it's since you're spending a lot of money to promote, and this should be actually set from the previous steps as well, but this is now the time to prioritize it. Sometimes certain customers would go in, would check your service or your portal or whatever, but wouldn't necessarily convert in terms of the bigger conversions, in terms of purchasing something or so on. But you still potentially want to remind them of you. Potentially in the future, they could turn into a customer. So it's very important at this point to start collecting emails, have them subscribe to a push notification, be on one of your social media platforms. Something like that would help the business with time. They might not be interested today, but maybe with time and being in touch with you, they get convinced to try out the product. Yeah, so that's basically it for this point. And the last one is listen and gain their trust overall.
Yeah.
One of the main ways of doing that is through content, be it on social media, be it on the website. It positions a brand as more of an expert in that area, and it enables users. It enables you to have a two-way communication with users. They ask questions, you can write about that, you answer certain topics they're interested in, and that builds trust one by one. Right. Also, a good customer service and a speedy one is super crucial. We've seen a lot of people going in, just checking out, for example, Ask a Stylist, having a few questions. We answer them on the spot. We try to give them as much details as they need. And then in a day or two, they come back and they convert. So that's, in my opinion, very important. And also having targeted customer service with each page or each product. You display a certain message instead of having it just generic. And last would be testimonials. I think they're crucial. Also at the beginning, we're doing them more of once people are done, we get their ratings and so on. But I don't think that's enough anymore. People expect to see more. People expect to see a user's experience and so on. So we're shooting now videos with them to have them tell others about their experience overall, and this builds trust and hopefully more retention by others or more users coming in.
Right.
I spoke way too much.
No. I mean, you've left me with so many insights. It's a big overview of the whole process, and I'm
glad to hear that.
Sorry?
I'm glad to hear that.
No, I love how it's integrated with the customer. You have that conversation and you keep it going for the whole duration at every step. And I find that really insightful because it's not just I'm going to launch a product and test it. It's you're really having a dialogue, right?
You can't test it kida. You have to test it on someone.
Right. No, but I mean, even when you're integrating it into the communications, the slogans that you utilize, the calls to action, everything is based on what they're saying. So you really I think active listening plays a key role, right?
Agreed. Very much agree with that.
Right. So tell us about, so you launched as your stylist, right?
As the stylist, yeah.
Yeah. And then with COVID, you're also adding the wardrobe element. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that came to your mind? Was it through interaction with customers? How did that happen?
It was also kind of inspired by one of our users, and but not entirely. Like she mentioned, I would want to do this and that in the future, right before COVID, and then we're like, okay, khalas, people are staying at home regardless. They have a lot of time on their hands, and eventually they'd get to cleaning up their wardrobe that they've been delaying for, in my case, 4 years maybe, or something like that. And at the same time, it's very much related to what we currently do. So that was one. We're also planning on launching like a styling course, because this is also inspired by our audience. They've asked for it numerous times. So it's basically just trying to figure out what it is they're looking for, and like keeping, like you've said, an open communication. And this for us gives us more of a sign of what they're ready to consume at this point versus what they're not in the mood, or because of because of the current circumstances, they're not willing to work with. I think the internet froze. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I am back. I'm sorry.
I'm like, am I gonna be alone now?
No, internet, and I see freeze in the screen.
Okay.
So interruption.
Okay, yeah. Now you're back.
You're back? Okay.
I'm back. I've been here.
It was funny because I was just the other day on Instagram, right, watching, and so many influencers are starting to do this wardrobe cleanup, this I don't know if
I've only heard you've been on Instagram and you've been seeing a lot of people do a wardrobe cleanup and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I was curious about this trend, this sort of like Marie Kondo started it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Do you think this is a growing trend in the future for, fashion and styling companies?
Of course. I think overall people have been adopting the trend or the idea of conscious fashion, using more what you have, spending less on things you don't actually need. So that's been going on for a while, but I think now is the time to actually start implementing it as much as possible.
Yeah, I love it, and I love that it's a walking example of how COVID also gives opportunity to think of new ways to serve your customer, not just focus on selling your product or your service, but how can you serve them and meet them where they are, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. Or else you're gonna lose, you're not gonna be able to survive.
Right. Taib, what are the plans now with Ramadan coming up, with COVID? What are your next steps with Fustany and with Ask a Stylist?
Okay, so obviously with Fustany, we're preparing a lot of very relevant content, a lot of we're launching a new website very soon. There's a lot going on, social media collaborations, third-party collaborations. So we're trying to keep ourselves as busy as possible. With Ask a Stylist, it's continue to grow it further, continue getting as awesome feedback as we've been getting now. Like I mentioned, we're going to launch the course as well very soon. So this is something exciting for us to see how people would react to it. Yeah. We're testing out several different scenarios on both platforms to react fast to what's happening. Okay, we have, let's say, X, Y, and Z in terms of ideas, implement them, leave them for a while, see which one gets the better conversions, we adapt. Just like I've mentioned, we'll keep it going for a while, and then we'll pick which ones we should go with or roll with on the longer run.
Right. Before finishing and concluding the interview, I wanted to leave some advice and some tips for entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs in our community that are, working in sort of in the fashion industry or the beauty industry. A lot of them sell products. What's your advice in this sort of turmoil that we're living?
Okay, so I'm not very good in giving advice, to be honest. But I would try to tell them to do the things I would tell myself to do. Okay, so for example, I think this is a perfect time for them to grow their knowledge when it comes to the business, to strengthen their relationship with their customers, to start getting a bit, if you're, let's say, a clothing brand, you shouldn't necessarily focus currently on selling more clothes. You should see what other activities would be added to your clients in a way that would complement them. And by activities, I don't necessarily mean like selling or so on, but what other things would your client benefit from? Offer that. It's time for collaborations. It's very important to do that. Build up a strong database, build up a strong amount of followers. Try as much as possible to gamify things. That's something a lot of people, entertainment is something a lot of people enjoy at this point, humor as well. So if you manage to combine all of these things and think of this moment or this time and period as more of a preparation to make your brand stronger in the future, you'd be able to hopefully get out of it much stronger, not where you've left things.
I love it. You're leaving us with an inspirational quote, which I love. Thank you so much, Amira.
Thank you, Valentina.
For joining and for all your insights. Best of luck and stay safe. Stay home.
Okay.
Let's make the best of the quarantine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.